wait, don't take that tourniquet off. We don't do that. Or do we? Let's talk about it on this episode of One for the Road. Sometimes we can get very absolute and dogmatic about areas of EMS practice and rules that we've learned or been told along the way, when the reality of patient care is that we work in a dynamic environment that often makes hard and fast rules impractical. That's why we have online medical control and protocols as guidelines. There are a variety of clinical pictures. Almost every rule has an exception. One that I want to explore is the rule that once a tourniquet is applied, it should never, ever be removed. In reality, I think there are some situations where the option to loosen or maybe even remove a tourniquet should be considered. Tourniquets are fantastic devices that should be employed whenever we recognize potentially life-threatening limb bleeding that isn't readily controlled by direct pressure or other measures. However, they are not without complications. They can cause vascular and nerve damage at the tourniquet site, as well as ischemia and tissue death in the limb below, especially if they're left on for greater than 90 minutes. So with that in mind, you may already be considering at least one of those circumstances where the tourniquet might be loosened while it's still in the pre-hospital setting. Even if your protocols say that tourniquets, once applied, should not be removed, I think there are some times when you might want to consider calling the emergency room and consulting with your medical control on this topic. One is when the tourniquet has been successful at stopping the bleeding and the patient is hemodynamically stable. So, vital signs don't suggest hemodynamic instability. You're not seeing tachycardia, hypotension, pallor, altered mental status, and the patient transport time is prolonged, either due to extraction or distance. So in these cases, I think consulting on loosening the tourniquet is appropriate. Simply loosening a tourniquet can help to reoxygenate and reperfuse limb tissue while keeping the blood pressure in the limb low enough to not cause new onset of bleeding if it's done slowly and it's done carefully. Keep in mind, we absolutely do not want to just pull a working tourniquet off of a patient. Any attempt to recirculate blood in the limb should be done slowly and it should be done carefully. And if new onset of bleeding ensues, we should immediately reapply that pressure. But often, once a wound has had some time to clot, some or most of that arterial pressure can return to the limb without creating new bleeding. I also want to go on record as saying that this is not a strategy that I would ever consider in the presence of a complete amputation. The goal here is to protect the tissues of the limb, and in a complete amputation, that's just not a significant concern. However, for a patient that still has an intact limb, once their life is no longer in jeopardy, we should also consider taking care of the limb if the tourniquet is likely to be on for an extended period of time. I hope you find that helpful. I'm Steve Whitehead. I appreciate you watching. That is One for the Road.